In this presentation, we will be discussing Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a form of chorea, a neurological disorder characterized by jerky, involuntary movements affecting especially the shoulders, hips, and face, according to the New Oxford American Dictionary. Huntington's disease, or hereditary chorea, was first observed by an American physician named Dr. Charles Oscar Waters in 1841. But its first full delineation was given by Dr. George Huntington of Philadelphia in 1872. Because of the significance of his contributions to our understanding of the condition, it has come to bear his name. According to Huntington's landmark paper titled Communications on Chorea, published in the Medical and Surgical Reporter, the disease first appeared in a group of families in New York, particularly on the east end of Long Island. Members of certain families, mostly men, according to Dr. Huntington, began exhibiting symptoms of ordinary chorea, namely the irregular and spasmodic actions of certain muscles, but in time, they were prone to bizarre behavior, including open and shameless marital infidelity during a time when society strongly disapproved of such behavior, and lewdness and even suicide. Huntington observed that the condition did not manifest until adulthood, between the ages of 30 and 40. And it was well documented that the disease was hereditary, which Huntington described in the following grim terms. It has been transmitted to them, an heirloom from generations away back in the dim past. When symptoms appeared, Huntington reports that they came on gradually but surely, increasing by degrees and often occupying years in its development, until the hapless sufferer is but a quivering wreck of his former self. Research into Huntington's has continued for 140 years, and in 1993, the genetic basis of the disease, which we'll discuss in just a moment, was identified by a collaborative effort of over 100 scientists. According to George Johnson in his Essentials of the Living World, 6th edition, Huntington's disease is caused by a dominant allele that leads to the progressive deterioration of brain cells. In the past, the diagnosis was based on the visible and external progress of the symptoms, particularly the appearance of them in adulthood, the familial connection to others who had the same condition, and the progressive severity of the degeneration manifesting in dementia, erratic behavior, and physical instability. Now that the genetic basis is understood, two tests, one predictive and one confirmatory, have been developed. However, although the predictive test can help inform one of the likelihood of contracting the disease by identifying whether or not one has the gene mutation, there are no disease-modifying treatments to stop or slow progression, according to huntingtondisease.com. Huntington's disease is caused by a defective gene on chromosome 4. According to an article from Johns Hopkins posted on hopkinsmedicine.org, this gene is found in every human being and contains a CAG repeat sequence. The gene's normal function has not been discovered, but in a case of Huntington's disease, the gene contains an abnormally large number of CAG repeats. The larger the number of triplet repeats, generally speaking, the earlier in life one will develop Huntington's. 40 or more CAG repetitions means that a person will definitely develop Huntington's at some point. An article on UC Davis's website notes that there are two prenatal tests to determine whether or not a child will have Huntington's before he or she is born. The first is amniocentesis, and the second is chorionic villus sampling. In amniocentesis, a needle is inserted into the amniotic cavity, and a sample of amniotic fluid containing some free cells derived from the fetus is withdrawn into a syringe. The fetal cells are then grown in culture, and their karyotype and many of their metabolic functions are examined. That explanation comes again from Johnson's Essentials of the Living World, 6th edition, page 185. In the chorionic villus sampling, the same source says the physician removes cells from the chorion, a membranous part of the placenta that nourishes the fetus. This allows the examination of the chromosomal karyotype, enzyme activity, and genetic markers. And these tests allow for a high probability diagnosis for conditions like Huntington's, but both tests may lead to miscarriage of the pregnancy, according to the Department of Health and Medicine at the University of Michigan. Huntington's is not one of the conditions for which the state of Missouri has mandated screening. Huntington's disease is hereditary, and because of the allele being dominant, every child who carries it will express the disorder. Every child of a parent who has the allele has at least a 50% chance of having the disease as well. In spite of Dr. Huntington's observation that the disease was more common in men than women, modern research reported by the Huntington Society of Canada suggests that there is no meaningful disparity between male and female offspring contracting the disease. The disease is fatal. No treatment is known to slow its progress, and no known cure exists. But it survives in families because of the late date of diagnosis in most cases. Since people are not diagnosed until after they're 30 years old, they've generally already had children and passed on the disease. The average lifespan of a victim of Huntington's disease, according to the Cleveland Clinic, is between 10 and 30 years after the diagnosis, but with one's condition progressively worsening throughout that time. Perhaps the most famous victim of Huntington's disease was the legendary American songwriter Woody Guthrie. But the tragedy of the disease is that it is no respecter of persons. Whether or not one will suffer from it is determined by his or her genetics before birth and beyond individual control. For further reading on the condition, I would recommend the following sources, especially Huntington's Disease, 4th edition, edited by Bates, Tabrizi, and Jones, and published by Oxford University Press. The websites of the National Human Genome Research Institute, the Huntington Society of Canada, and the Hereditary Disease Foundation have a wealth of information, much of which was consulted and used in this presentation. And huntingtonsdisease.com also is a great resource for further consideration of this important subject.